to Being Matthew 25, a live stream series from the Presbyterian Mission Agency. I'm your host, Diette Decker, Director of Communications, and I want to thank you for joining us today. It is going to be a fabulous show today with our guests, the co-moderators of the 225th General Assembly, the Reverend Ruth Faith Santana-Grace and the Reverend Shavon Starling-Louis. But before we get to our guests today, I want to be sure that you know about some of our incredible Matthew 25 resources. We've been getting lots of requests and questions about, do you have any resources? Well, we do. We recently updated our website to show and highlight these resources. All you have to do is go to that website that is going across the screen, and there you will find in-depth resources on our three main foci of Matthew 25: building congregational vitality, dismantling structural racism, and eradicating systemic poverty. There are Bible studies, there's lectionary resources, there's worship resources, bulletin inserts. We've got lots of videos for you to use, and even Matthew 25 graphics. So hit up the website at the bottom of your screen, get all of these fabulous resources absolutely free. That's right, absolutely free. Simply go to the website, click on the resources tab, and they're yours to enjoy. So today, again, we are extremely blessed to have as our guests the co-moderators of the 225th General Assembly, the Reverend Ruth Faith Santana-Grace and the Reverend Shavon Starling-Louis. Welcome to Being a Matthew 25.
Thank you, Diette.
It is so great. I'm so excited to have you all. You have no idea. This is such a coup. I love you guys and admire you for the great work that you've been doing. And, it's a lot that you all are tasked with. And so I know your time is valuable. You have a lot of plates that you're juggling. So thank you so much. Now, Shavon, I believe last fall when we were at a retreat together, I have asked you this. So Ruth, I'm hitting you up first. Why? Why would anyone want to be a co-moderator? This is such a difficult job, and you have to balance it. I don't know if everybody knows, but as a co-moderator, you balance those duties alongside with your regular, quote, job and call, along with family obligations. Why did you seek this role?
Well, Diette, that is the million-dollar question that people love asking us. I have to tell you, honestly, I thought I wanted to seek this role a decade ago, and I came to Philadelphia, and timing is everything, right? So I really thought that window had gone, and I was really in a great space here at the Presbyterian Philadelphia. But God clearly has a sense of humor. And, when you get a call from someone on the Monday morning that you respect deeply, saying, Ruth, you need to stand. We need your voice, your bridge building capacity. And my response is, are you out of your mind? But that began this genuine stirring and conversations with colleagues that I respect, and all roads kept pointing to, you really should consider standing. That God might be, I had to ask myself, could it be that God is, and my gifts at this point of bridge building, of bringing people together across theological divides, racial divides, political divides, could it be a time to use those gifts? And once I made peace that maybe God was indeed calling, and I think where I made real peace was, I will be in the room offering some perspective, whether or not we were elected. Mm-hmm. And for me as a Latina, being in that room at this stage, having a voice that I believe did matter, was significant, and being encouraged by so many. So I was a reluctant pursuit of hearing God's voice. And then, making my own blind phone call to this extraordinary now sister friend, just our energy became in sync. And then the synergy that we brought together, we are called to stand, not called to win. And we were good with that, was our approach to this whole thing, valuing that what we brought, at least to standing, would be a gift to the church, could be valuable. And so that's, this is a tough season. It's a season of distrust, post-pandemic, polarization. And we just connected in a way that was unexpected to both of us. Because
we're seeing now some pictures from the General Assembly, and you clearly have a synergy and an energy together that is really fantastic. How did you choose Shavon? How did that come to be?
I started going through the commissioner names, and because of the structure of this assembly, finding anyone under 40 was like finding a needle in a haystack. So I'm hyperbolizing, but it was not easy, right? Because 3-week window is no joke. I know we're experimenting with modalities, but that made it difficult. Her name came up to two people, kind of like, there's Shavon. And I'm like, I went online, I saw her speak. I asked my son to take a look at her. And I didn't like the fishing expeditions yet. So I really, once I felt something for Shavon, I just called her cold. I had no clue.
Wow. You all hadn't met at all.
Never.
No communication, ever met. You are kidding me. Wow. So Shavon, you get this call out of the blue from Ruth. What are you thinking?
Oh, okay. So I think the Holy Spirit has a way of breaking things in ways that you're like, okay, at least for me, it's so clear that it doesn't make any sense, but it makes all the holy sense. So there had been these stirrings to take serious the consideration to stand, but I had a lot of transition take place, a change in call. There was just a lot of transitions. And I just remember probably January or so saying, and when we do the registration, when I was looking at it, there was a place for looking at the moderator standing. And I just remember very clearly saying, God, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know how this is supposed to happen. If you want this to happen, you need to make it happen.
No. Wow.
And I was perfectly fine with no entering into that conversation anymore. I was just like, you know what? If this is supposed to be, clearly it'll be, because it will need to have happened. But I was not interested in pursuing it anymore, because I just found it to be a little annoying that I kept having this little twinge in my heart every time I would see this on paper. And so I kind of stepped away. And so when I got this email and a Facebook message from this, I always say this about Ruth, it is the most faithful name I have ever heard in my entire life. Ruth Faith Santana-Grace. It's holy on every corner. And one of my favorite names in the world is Grace, for lots of reasons, theologically, but also some real embodied experiences. And so I was like, okay, this has your fingerprints on it, Lord. I don't know what this is. And at the time when she reached out to me, she didn't include that it was going to be about moderating standing. I was working with I had stepped in as one of the co-leaders for the worship services for General Assembly. And so I thought it might have been regarding that. She just mentioned it had to do with General Assembly. So I had no clue. But her name was like, oh, let me just make sure I get this call back, return this message. And I just remember us talking for the very first time. And I'm sitting in my bed, and like just this incomprehensible sense that God was in the room. Something holy was happening. No matter what, if it was just that I was supposed to meet this sister and I was supposed to have this conversation, I just remember feeling like something crazy, to the point that I like called my husband kind of shaking, like, you wouldn't believe the wild question, opportunity, conversation. I'm not really sure what, because it wasn't a direct ask, because I think in a very faithful way, Ruth was taking serious discernment to finding a partner and what it would mean to even be open to finding the right person. And so it was just a real beautiful, holy experience of meeting someone that I believed God had called. And then immediately I called some people who had served in the role as moderator to say, hey, I got this phone call. I don't really know how it all is, but like, what do you sense? And I got some senses of her personhood that were just very affirming. That, and then we started talking. That was a Friday, and then we talked on Sunday. And I did the crazy thing, and I mentioned this is I think a key moment that Ruth and I share. I shared with the my clerk of session. I had the craziest phone call on Friday, and she happened to be going to General Assembly as a commissioner. And I thought, and she said, oh, you're going to do it. And I thought, what? I'm like, you're going to do it. It's going to be fine. And I was like, And and again, this is a brand new call. So I was sure that they were going to be very uncomfortable with this ask, the consideration. But I first thought the session would shut it down. They were 100% unanimous in support. And then I thought, well, I'll bring it to the congregation and they'll shut it down. And they were
there for that meeting.
Yeah, and Ruth was there when the congregation had I called the congregational meeting just to because I knew it would be a communal call. If this was meant to be both the Presbyterian of Philadelphia and the congregation that I serve, Memorial Presbyterian Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, for which I am so proud to be their pastor. It was going to be these two communities walking together in a particular way, because they're going to be sharing their leader with a larger space, even if it was just for the very faithful. And Ruth said this: we felt called to stand. That whatever it was, that the things that we were creating and understanding why we were called, there was a sense of holiness, and even the fact that they aligned so well and they were so in tune, that it felt right. Hope I didn't talk too much, but
that's what we're here for. We're chatting it up. Don't worry about talking too much.
Yeah, the other thing was my people were real protective of me.
That's true.
So the first time, the presbytery voted unanimously for me, right, to stand, and they took it. They made this presentation owning the journey. I mean, they were 5 speakers, and then we brought Shavon in, and then we had a meeting with Shavon, and I know my people. I have all these under 40s, under 45 who are like extraordinary, and they fell in love with her too. And it was an awkward first moment, right? Because
I didn't know they felt. I was like, oh my gosh, are they thinking this is crazy? I like it, because it is, like, on paper, this is insane that people that I can't believe we didn't know each other this time last year, Ruth. I just can't. I can't understand.
And we met for the first time in person at my son's house a month later
on Easter Day.
On Easter.
Wasn't that Easter? Or it was a Monday after Easter. That's right. We drove up on Easter. We drove from North Carolina to DC on Easter.
That is nothing more than God making a way, right? Yeah. It's interesting to me, Shavon, to hear you say, I had these inklings and these kind of tinklings of maybe, and I was getting really frustrated because I was like, well, come on, and it just reminds me that of our timing is not always God's timing.
Yeah,
and it just affirms that everything about your story of coming together, in my mind, affirms that this is your work for this time, for this church, exactly where we are. And you all stood together under the theme of Unbound, We Thrive. Can you say more about what that means to you and how you see that playing in the Presbyterian Church?
So I'll do the first volley. We created a platform because the platform would help us navigate our points of focus, right? So for me, the Unbounded, We Thrive piece, we're emerging from this season of extreme hyperbole, polarization, distrust, pandemic. It's a pretty intuned kind of season. But as a people of resurrection hope, a lot has happened in this season that we have to leave behind, right? And we really, this is what we loved about each other. We really believe that we are being called out of that space into a space of new possibilities or resurrection hope. So, if you think about the Easter story, there's linens left behind, right? Stuff that keeps us confined in some ways. So that the possibilities, if we go out together and follow this light of resurrection, are boundless. And we believe that, right? We believe that with our spirits, and that was a bind that brought us together too. But we believe there's much to do out there in this extraordinary Easter reality.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about you said emerge, which is for the Presbyterian Mission Agency. That is our word for the year, emerge. And it calls to mind, Isaiah 40:19. Can you not perceive I am doing a new thing? Can you see it? And that's exactly, I think, what you're talking about, letting go of what was, what the past entailed. And if we are a resurrection people, right, we have to let go of that for that new thing to be born, for that new thing to emerge. So I love that approach, that unbound we thrive. Shavon, I'm gonna throw this one to you. I think we've all heard folks say, oh, the church is no longer relevant. It's an outdated institution. It's dying, all of that sort of stuff. And I'm wondering what you think of this notion and how you see the church as still being relevant in the world.
I think as a follower of Christ, I don't believe the church is dying. The body of Christ is alive and well. I do recognize that things are changing, and change is grief, if we're perfectly honest. There are things that we will imagine that should continue that may have served their time, and we have not. And I think in our tradition, we can get better at lamenting. The GA theme last year was lament to hope. And we don't always take seriously that if we don't truly lament, we still carry. And we feel so much weighed down that our building isn't the way it used to be, or the number of people in the building is, rather than saying, what is it that God is calling us to do as followers for Christ now? Last week's lectionary was the call of the disciples. Like, the invitation to follow Christ is consistent. Therefore, the church, the actual living body of Christ, cannot die, won't die, impossible. But maybe the practices or the parts of institutions that have no longer served their purpose truly may be going into a season of, I think, of pruning, in which the thing that is no longer you could use energy there, but if you prune it, allows it to grow more faithfully in the way that it should grow. The gift of pruning isn't always just to make it look nice, because usually it doesn't look nice. It looks awkward and weird and not what you would expect it to look like, but it gives the plant the space and the wisdom in its own way of being to grow and flourish in the way that it needs to. It can actually thrive if we let go or unbound it by the things that we think that we have to keep. Like, a church must have this, that, and the other. That has nothing to do with Jesus. Like, it never had anything. It might be meaningful. It might even be comforting. And maybe we are called to hold on to it. Or maybe it's, it was once comforting. And what would be the new thing that would love the people, that would reflect our deep love of God and the ability to love our neighbors as ourselves?
Yeah. Ruth, anything from you? I mean, that's...
Shavon said it well, right? For me, it's not the message of the gospel. The message of the gospel is as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago.
Amen.
So to say we're not relevant is almost a heresy. If you, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
think about the core values of Jesus's teachings. It's what we have entrapped ourselves with as part of that Shavon's already addressed. But the message is powerful especially for a culture that's hurting.
And has lost the ability to, like, the common good feels like such a foreign topic in some ways. The sense of like truly being a community that loves each other, like really loves each other, that enough to hold each other accountable and support. It's just, I don't know, there's just so much growth and possibility out there for healing and wellness and, recovering from traumas. Like there's so much that the church is and can do.
Do you think that I don't know, I wonder if we have forgotten how to do that as a church during the pandemic, or if we ourselves are so traumatized by the pandemic and this, the pandemic of COVID, the pandemic of racial injustice, racism, the whole 9 yards. If that is somehow coming into play, and almost paralyzing us, or have we just forgotten? Have we become insurely focused? What do we need to do to shift this? Because you're right, the gospel hasn't changed, and if we need love and healing and peace, I mean, we need it now just as much as ever.
It's interesting, Diet. The one thing that I was talking to Shavon about last week is that I'm watching our corporate grief that's not being named as corporate grief. People who've been faithful saints, people who love this church, somehow we're not claiming it as our grief, right? We're losing something that we love, that has loved us in our way of growing up, of embodying what we believe we've been called to do. And somehow we have to claim this grief so that maybe we could leave it and allow for something new to be born, right? But I'm watching, it breaks my heart because it comes out sideways. It's like Shavon might say something and then I'll go, well, there she goes again. And instead of taking a deep breath and just claiming this is hard, this is painful, I am sad that what has been is no longer, but we don't know what it's gonna be.
Right.
So can we take a breath and allow for this new thing that you just quoted, right? Behold, I'm about to do this new thing. And I'm realizing that more and more as I see commentaries, as I see responses. And that for me is one of our biggest challenges. How do we allow for ourselves to honestly say, this is just not what I was hoping. This is sad. I am sad, but I have to believe that God will take us somewhere if we allow ourselves to go.
I wonder if we don't know how to live in Holy Saturday.
We are, I would say, relatively disembodied in our tradition and the PCUSA as a denomination. And so the reality is that in order to be able to heal through hard things, your body has to be allowed to engage with that truth.
Amen.
One of the things that I miss is just for folks to know rocking is a natural response. This idea that we come to worship and we are stoic is not necessarily faithful to anything
human.
Period. Exactly. It's a disembodied and a despirited way of being rather than a way that allows you to say, oh, yeah, there's something that needs to move in me. There's something that needs to shift in me. I find both, inviting folks to be real with their bodies whether it's paying attention to your heart rate, breath, all these things that we carry around with us that are wisdoms that are the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit identifies as breath and wind. We leave exactly. We leave it on the cutting room floor when God is like, your healing is here. Can you breathe? Can you conspire together? Can you breathe together? Can you figure out what it is you're called to do in community that would allow the truth to be said? And I've told Ruth, I also think we struggle with telling the truth.
Well, that's true.
Say more about that.
Well, I just think we are not honest with what we experience. We have side room conversations. We don't bring things in the middle of the spaces where we have a chance to heal it together. Instead, oftentimes it's easier to have a conversation over here or over there. But if it's something that communally we have to change norms or we have to change processes, it's really important for it to be shared as a communal caring, not about, I want to change this person, or I want to change how that's happening, but what are our values? What are our hopes? What are the things we believe we're called to do? What are the practices that we can recognize that would shift how we operate with each other and allow us to talk? And I won't feel hurt if you say, "Oh, Shavon, you're doing that thing that we kind of said that we weren't going to do," or I recognize we're doing that thing that we've fallen into a pattern of, and to pray right in the middle of it, not about can we just pray that this is happening? What is it that you would have us do? It's not.
It comes across as self-righteousness, cynicism.
Yes.
So somebody recently introduced me to the idea of calling in rather than calling out.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That blew. I mean,
Yep.
It sounds like such an easy shift.
Yep.
Like, well, of course.
We're going to call, what is the thing we want to be drawn to, rather than saying, and then it shifts it from a place of shame, and it shifts it from a place of alienation to a place of, oh, we are in this together.
Possibilities,
It's the blessing of the Johari window is that Diet knows things that I don't know.
Right.
I don't have to feel threatened by that. I love that for her. I love that for us. And she can show me things. Shavon, I think you're talking too much. I'll stop because I'm talking too much. Right? Like, we are in this together because I'm going to trust that Diet wants the best for me because I want the best for her and I want the best for Ruth. And I just, but we have to.
But we're trying to do that in a culture that has absolutely not encouraged that, right?
Yeah.
That encourages the opposite. So how do we stop mirroring the values of the culture even when we don't mean it, right?
Amen.
Well, and also we live in a culture that's full of suspicion and lacks trust, which you have to have, as Shavon, pointed out, you have to have that trust of one another. And I like to say trusting positive intentions.
Yes.
I'm going to trust that your intention behind what you said is a positive one. It's said out of love and grace and care for me. And the impact, right? We know there's a difference between intention and impact.
Right.
I'm going to trust your positive intention as a member of this community, no matter how that impact might have felt at the time, right? I don't think that's hard. One, that is hard. And two, that is completely opposite of what society and culture has shaped and embedded in us.
And to be honest, it's also not a fair expectation for everybody in the room, right? So as a person of color, if I am to assume, and I assume the best of people, but I also know that we are formed in a certain society that may oftentimes lead people of color or marginalized communities to be regularly mistreated. And so it's do we trust that together we're creating something where everybody can be more uplifted, everybody is being heard, but we can also, that we're not there yet. So there's a hole between the now and the not yet. There's a hole between the world as it is and the world that we believe it to be. And so long as we're being real honest, that's where the truth part, because if we're not being real honest, that there's a gap between how we're treating or experiencing things, it can be hard.
But we have to also, in our structural confines, we have to figure out how to create the conditions of how to allow for those honest conversations, right?
Mm.
We throw people in from all these other spaces, we throw them in, and the upfront work that is required to create some equalizing ground. I mean, I've served on 2 national boards, right, that are pretty influential by the world's perspective, and it's hard for women of and women of color. It was hard. Let me not generalize. It was hard for me
Yeah.
to enter those spaces. So even
Mhm.
when we're at the table,
Mhm.
Shavon alluded to this, our expectations of that seat, of that conversation are very different.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I think that's such a good point and such an honest, powerful point that there is a gap. And thank you for raising that and saying that. That it's making me think more about, that because it's not fair to say to put that added burden onto our siblings of color. So yeah, I think that's a great point. So let me ask you, it seems to me everything we've talked about today, has just been relational in nature, right? How we interact with one another, what we, how we experience one another, how we show up in the room. So, Ruth, you said at the 225th General Assembly, upon being called as co-moderator, quote, "We are deeply relational people. This is who we are, and we trust God will continue to allow us to use those gifts." We often say here on Being Matthew 25 that the Matthew 25 movement's foundation is relationships. It all starts with building relationships. So I'm wondering, how have you seen this play out over your last several months as a co-moderator?
You know, one of the deepest values I bring is, I think, and we share, is nothing replaces incarnation. Nothing. I don't care how good the screen is, unless we're able to spend some time engaging one another in a way that takes away the tables, the restrictions around us. It just doesn't. We may be, Jesus preached to the crowd, but he discipled a small group. Let's be clear. He inspired, but he discipled, right?
Right. Yeah.
So for me, this incarnation is what has, inviting people into my spaces. I'm going to speak for me right now. Whether I was living in Europe or I'm living in DC, has always been a gift in that it breaks down people's assumptions. That's what incarnation does, right? It breaks down, you can't put me in a box if you have to engage me one to one. You could try, but I probably will no longer fit neatly into that box. So for me, that's a core value for who we're called to be as a people of the gospel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think every time Shavon and I step into a space as who we are, reflecting our thoughts, our hopes, our affirmation of the other, of their ministry, of their possibilities, of their commitment, faithfulness. It's like a bomb that allows for both healing and building on something new based on this new thing, this new collaboration, this new partnership. This People are so tired yet. They don't feel seen. They don't feel if they're seen. I mean, Siobhan, the feedback we got on a 4-minute video we did for the inauguration of Victor Aloyo at Columbia, we did it differently. We did it together. People really felt us. That's funny, but it's real, right? In some ways, it's like, really? But people need this relational piece. And that's been a ministry that I've brought forever in these 30 years. And it's a ministry that Shavon clearly brings with how she engages the world. So that's what I have on that. It is pivotal. It is essential. It is who we're called to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Shavon, how about you? How have you seen this relational piece play out, specifically in your co-moderators role over the last several months?
Actually, I do. Before Shavon goes, I have an example.
Great.
Remember, the 225th made a statement about apartheid and Israel. I had to come home. And I am in the greater Philadelphia area. Let me be clear. Yeah. Our Jewish allies, our friends, it's real here. So I'm not going to deny the statement. But what I did was we did meet with all the rabbis and Jewish leaders who brought concerns. We reaffirmed our commitment in person to continue to deepen those relationships in our common quest to resist all forms of injustice. That's the best I could do, but I can only do that in person. So that we can continue to work. And we did. We worked on an anti-racism initiative right away with our regional Jewish leadership. That's one example. You can't do this by emails or broad statements. You have to be willing to be hit in the room.
Yeah.
To take the pain, to not deny that what we have said hurts them because they receive it in how they have received it, and then see if we can find a way forward. So I just wanted to share that because that was real after the General Assembly.
Yeah, absolutely. Very real. And I don't think we can just, going back to what we had said earlier in this conversation, we can't just push that aside and act as if it didn't happen. That wouldn't be living the truth. Yeah. Shavon, how have you experienced it?
I think so. To piggyback or connect with what Ruth was saying, it is that the real impacts can be complicated, and to hold space for the fact that we are all learning and navigating real spaces that are complex, and we are all coming into these streams of loving the church from different spaces and rhythms. And so a part of, I think, the relationality in whether it's however Ruth and I are invited to be in places, it is to, as best we can, really connect with the people that we are with. There is nothing like reminding and being connected to the fact that we're all in this together as a family. Like none of us, I don't believe, I mean, there's probably somebody, but this is not where you come if you want to be like famous on some, like, this is not it. This is not, we're here because we love Jesus. That's our core connector. And so we can share the love of Jesus to say, I see you, you're doing it. I'm so grateful for what you're doing. I couldn't do what you're doing, and I'm proud of you. That's the stuff that I think enlivens our hearts, reminds us that we're seen. When I'm inspired by a story I see on Matthew 25's website, and I can share that with my congregation, that makes a huge difference. When I can share the language of why we believe these things are happening, that we are invited to be a part of as the church, and I can point to all these other places where it's bubbling up, it's a sign of the Spirit happening that relates us and connects us better than I could ever do from one solitary story. But like, this isn't just it's happening here, but here's here's how we understand systematic and racism, or here's how we understand that these are that poverty is something that is systematic as well, and that they are interlaced with each other. It helps to have multiple stories so we can create a more meaning making for our congregation as well. And that all happens out of relationship. If I don't hear your story or make room for your story, it can't impact me, and I can't carry it to the other person that I'm hoping to share the same story with. So listening becomes really, really important. And just reminding each other that we are the siblings that God has sent to each other to do this work now. And that's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Speaking of the work you're called to do now, or that we're all called to do now, I feel like I have to address the elephant in the room and what lots of people are probably wondering about. and that's the commission work. You all were faced with a very daunting task, really, of seating a commission to unify the Office of General Assembly and the Presbyterian Mission Agency. I know that the commission has been seated and they've met a couple of times. I know twice. Okay. I know you guys are really faithful in trying to be there. Do you have an update? What's going on? Where are we?
I'll start. They've met twice. They are doing faithful work. They're just at the very beginning of their journey, right? And this is a daunting task. Everyone knows it's a daunting task, but it's a task that's been decades in the making, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we belong to 7 sisters that are all experiencing this. So it's an opportunity after decades of a trend. We feel really good about the leadership. I think we need people to continue to pray for them. They're just building an infrastructure by which to have the conversations. They're building, hopefully, relationships of trust. We're looking forward to March, right? When they will be together in person. We think that'll be pivotal for them.
Sure.
But there's nothing to report other than they are doing. Shavon and I are faithfully being present there because this is significant. Yeah. But we think it's an extraordinary opportunity. There is no cookie cutter. There is no out there. We have a prediction. We've got to let God's Spirit work through these people.
Yeah. So. Yeah, absolutely. It seems to me that, as you said, the work is daunting. And I think it's important that we all remember them and you in our prayers as we move forward. Most of us here watching, we don't have a seat at the table. And I would venture to guess most of us, I know for myself, would not want a seat at that table. That's a lot of hard work. So let's all continue to lift them up in prayers. Well, Shavon and Ruth, ladies, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Dia. This has been fun.
Yeah, good. I'm glad this was I have to say, I've checked this off my bucket list. So whenever I saw you all at GA and then Shavon got the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you earlier, I thought, yeah, I can't wait to hang out and have a conversation. So thank you. I know that you guys are busy. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to spend some time with us and share your hearts to minister to us. We will continue to lift you in prayer as you go about the rest of your work as co-moderators. So thank you.
We want to say thank you to you. Thank you, Diet. And thank you to the team that does this podcast. And thank you for the full of all that helps for this Matthew 25 work to be done and shared. Like, it's incredible. So
Matthew 25 has provided a framework that I think has become invaluable and accessible to the larger church. So thank you for your work.
It is, it all goes back to the 2016 General Assembly. That's where the Matthew 25 dream started with, at that assembly.
Absolutely.
So we're just walking out and trying our best to live out what God has called us all to do, right?
Sounds like Jesus worked to me.
Sounds like Jesus worked to me. Let's do it. Okay, so thank you so much. And friends, as Presbyterians through the Matthew 25 movement, we are being a relevant voice in the world. If you are a group, a presbytery, a synod, a church, I want to invite you to join the Matthew 25 movement today. The Matthew 25 vision is our guidepost, and action is our charge. As Presbyterians, we can live out this charge by connecting our passion with purpose, Jesus' work, being a light in the dark world and disturbing the status quo as we use our gifts to lift others up. Listen, it's a really simple process, and it only requires a short form. It's like this big. and getting to get to the good work of representing Christ to the world. So go to the website listed at the bottom of your screen right now. Why should you join the Matthew 25 movement? Well, because it's Jesus' work, and because we are a connectional church. We can do more together. So be a part of the Matthew 25 movement. We're going to provide you with resources, groups, tools, an app to connect you to other churches, presbytery groups, and synods who are actively engaging the world through this movement. So join today and let us be the church together. And if you are already a part of the Matthew 25 movement, we want to hear your stories. Let's show them to the world to inspire, encourage, and equip others to do the same Jesus work. So tell us how you are being the change the world needs to see by going to www.presbyterians.org/ministries Matthew 25. And speaking of stories, we've got some exciting episodes for you this year. In March, we're looking at heteropatriarchy as we visit with the Presbyterian ministry at the United Nations during the annual Commission on the Status of Women. The 67th session of the Commission on the Status of Women will consider the priority theme of innovation and technological change in education in the digital age for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. And we are going to also highlight the great work that the Presbyterian office at the United Nations does. And I am already looking forward to next month's episode featuring First Presbyterian Church in Knoxville. And we sit down with them and their community partners to talk about how to go about creating systemic change rather than Band-Aid solutions. So don't miss that episode. You can tune in Thursday, February 16th at 1 p.m. on our Facebook or YouTube channels. Until then, peace.